He had not seen her in 2 years. The last time she had looked at him, she had laughed. Not cruelly, he had decided this carefully, in the weeks after, and he believed it was true. She had laughed the way you laugh at something impossible, rather than at the person asking for it. The distinction mattered less than he had hoped. He had asked for a second chance. He had walked out of her conference room and across the parking lot to his car and driven directly to his attorney's office, where a term sheet had been waiting for him for 3 days. The term sheet was for Parallax. He had signed it that afternoon. He had not explained this to anyone. 2 years later, Voss Analytics, her company, had lost 40% of its market, and she was standing on his dock at Garrison Marina on a Thursday evening with a catering coordinator and a table layout diagram, asking why the setup couldn't go on the east side of the pier. She did not know who he was. She had not yet seen the name on the hull of the sloop at his slip. Phoebe was in the workshop behind him, the blue glass float on the windowsill beside her, catching the last of the evening light. The name on the transom was visible from where Nadia Voss was standing 8 feet of clear sightline. Letters he had painted himself, exactly this size and no larger. She had not looked yet. He could hear, under her feet, the hollow pitch of a dock plank 14 months past its safe load date, and she was about to put 8 catering tables on the delaminated side, and he set down the sander and walked toward her. His name was Owen Calder, and he had walked away from one life and into another, and the transition had left marks on both. The workshop at Garrison Marina was 3 slips and a converted storage building long enough for a hull under restoration, high enough for a stepped mast, smelling permanently of teak oil and salt air, and the particular kind of work that cannot be rushed without being ruined. He had leased it 2 years ago with the carry from his second fund, and spent the first 6 months learning how to do something with his hands that required no projections. The current work order listed 3 vessels: a Herreshoff sloop from the 1960s, hull number 4 of 8, which the owner's estate was having restored to sailing condition because the owner had once crossed the Atlantic in it and wanted his granddaughter to know a boat could do that if it was built correctly. A fiberglass runabout being refitted with teak decking, the family's 4th generation of owner. The wood matched to a 1971 launch photograph. And the sloop at his personal slip, 32 feet, wooden, hull 7 of 12 in its series, which he had bought with the first carry from Parallax 2 years ago, and named accordingly. He had painted the letters himself, on a Saturday in October, when the light was good for the work. Parallax. He had told himself it was accountability. He had spent 2 years testing whether that was accurate. Phoebe was 6 years old and had decided this year that she was a traveler in the manner of the blue glass float on the workshop windowsill, which she had named the Traveler, and handled with the same seriousness she gave everything she considered important. The float was the size of a softball, dimpled from the mold, worn at one spot she called the Trip. Her father had told her that the glass had drifted across the Pacific for years before someone found it on a beach in Oregon, and Phoebe had decided that anything that crossed an entire ocean on its own deserved to know where it had arrived. She carried it in a worn cloth bag in her left coat pocket, and she did not name things lightly. The ticking clock was specific. In 84 hours, at 9 a.m., on Friday, the Voss Analytics Series D round would close $320 million at a $750 million valuation. Owen knew this from the announcement his firm's newsletter had flagged 2 months ago. He also knew that at noon on Thursday, 72 hours from now, the Parallax board was scheduled to announce Parallax Pro, the enterprise platform whose product development had been accelerated, as Owen had discovered 3 months ago in the board documents, by client data that someone inside Voss Analytics had sold to a Parallax subsidiary. If the announcement ran on schedule, Voss's valuation would collapse below the Series D threshold before the round closed. Owen had known this for 3 months. He had spent 3 months deciding what it meant that he knew it. He had 12 fewer hours now. 84 hours. He picked up the sander and walked down to the East Pier. Nadia Voss had closed the acquisition of Anchor Data Systems that morning, 34 million in R, a product suite she had been watching since spring. The move she had been calling strategic, and her board had been calling defensive, and which was, in the honest accounting she kept privately. She had completed the term sheet by 8 a.m. and explained the valuation multiple to her board 3 times since. She was the CEO of Voss Analytics. She had built it from a rented office above a print shop to a company with 400 employees and 800 clients, and a market position that had been the basis of a Series C at 500 million before Parallax had started taking. She was managing the erosion. She was very good at managing things. Her wound was not the erosion. Her wound was this: her father had left when she was 7 years old. He had packed a bag on a Sunday afternoon, and she had stood at the apartment door and asked him directly, plainly, in the way that 7-year-olds ask for things before they have learned not to, if he would stay. He had looked at her. Then he had gone. She had spent 23 years ensuring she was never again the person at the door, which meant she was always the first one to leave, the first one to make something smaller before it could make her smaller. She had not examined this in any detail until a man in a conference room had looked at her 2 years ago with an expression she recognized from the apartment doorway and asked her, in the same plain way, for a second chance. She had laughed. She had thought, driving home that evening, that he would have understood what the laugh meant. He had not. He had understood only the sound. Tonight she was catering a client dinner at the waterfront venue she had booked through the marina, and the East Pier was rated for commercial events, and the man in the work jacket walking toward her across the dock was about to say something she had not asked to hear. He reached the dock at 6:51 p.m. She looked up from the coordinator's tablet with the specific expression of someone who has a plan and has arrived at the point in the plan where unsolicited input becomes a structural problem. He looked at the dock. He listened for 2 seconds, his head tilted slightly to the left. Then, the 14th plank from the south end is delaminated. You can hear it in the pitch of the hollow when the water passes under it, a half-frequency drop every 12 seconds, specific to adhesive failure between the lamination layers. 8 tables and 200 pounds of service equipment, and this section goes into the water. She assessed him the way she assessed any variable she had not accounted for from the top: the work jacket, the hands, the unhurried specific quality of someone who spends their days on other people's property. "The venue has been approved for commercial events," she said. "I don't need the dock crew to sign off on the layout." He crouched beside the 14th plank. He placed one hand flat on the surface, palm down, and waited for the next wave. The wave came. The plank gave out a sound, not a creak, something lower, a hollow register that was barely audible from a standing position, but was, to anyone with their hand on the wood, specific and final. He stood, he looked at her. 14 tables, center configuration, west side only, he said. "I'll move the mooring lines for clearance. East side for the second course, after the load on the west distributes." He turned back toward his slip. "Give it an hour." She was about to redirect the coordinator when her eye found the sloop at his slip, the hull, the transom, the letters in the size he had chosen. Parallax. She went still. She looked at the back of the man walking away from her, at his hands, at the specific way he was moving back toward the boat whose name she had just read. Is that the sentence arrived before she had decided to begin it? She stopped herself. The name sat in the air between them, and he was still walking, and she was standing on the dock with the coordinator's tablet in her hand, and her grip on it had tightened, and he reached his slip and went back to the sanding, and she did not finish the question, and he did not turn around. The 14th plank gave out its hollow sound every 12 seconds, right on schedule. She had not sent anyone to count the planks. Phoebe arrived at the marina the next evening at 6:15. She came through the workshop door with the cloth bag in her left hand and her hair in 2 braids already escaping their bands, and she surveyed the dock the way she surveyed anything she had not seen before fully, without hurry, starting from the thing that interested her most and working outward. The thing that interested her most was Nadia. Nadia was on the west side dock reviewing the event debrief with the coordinator. Phoebe walked to the end of the pier, looked at the name on the transom with the same attention she gave to anything that required understanding, and then turned and looked at Nadia. "Dad says you can always tell who the important ones are," she said. "They're the ones trying hardest not to look." Nadia, she found the adult register even, calibrated, the appropriate warmth for a child she had just met. "That's a very specific thing to notice. Is your dad the man in the workshop?" Phoebe tilted her head and considered this as a practical question. "He's the man who noticed the dock before you did," she said. It was a statement of fact, delivered without emphasis, a breath. The water moved under the pier. "What are you carrying?" Nadia said. "Not the register of someone making conversation, the register of someone who has stopped performing disinterest." Phoebe opened the cloth bag. She held up the float blue, the size of a softball, catching the slip's evening light. "This is the Traveler," she said. "It crossed the whole Pacific before someone found." "Dad says the important things always know where they're supposed to end up." She looked at the float, then at the name on the transom. "They just take the long way." Nadia opened her mouth. She did not find anything to say. That was the moment. Not tears and not warmth, a half second where something she had been carrying slipped and she did not catch it, and Owen stepped out of the workshop doorway and saw it happen. And what was in his face as he stood there watching her not find an answer was a thing that did not need to be described. Phoebe held the float in the light, unhurried, already certain the answer would arrive. "She's right," Owen said from the doorway. He did not come closer. They always do. He went back inside. Nadia stood on the dock for a full minute after Phoebe followed him in. The name on the transom was still there. She did not look at it again. She did not need to. She was already holding it the way you hold something that is not finished yet. Brendan Soule arrived at the marina at 7:30 the next evening. He came through the gate already looking at his phone, the particular forward lean of a man whose attention is always half ahead of his location. He saw Nadia near the workshop. He walked toward her. Before he spoke, he pushed the frame of his glasses left a quarter-inch, automatic. The same push he made before any statement he was not entirely certain was true, and said, "The caterers flagged the East Pier limitation." I spoke directly to the venue manager. He confirmed the full commercial certification covers both sides. Owen was at the parallax hull, 30 feet away, working with a long sanding block. Brendan looked in his direction. "Is that the dock? Should they be this close to the event setup?" Nadia said nothing. Owen set the sanding block on the rail. He did not turn around immediately. He turned. His voice dropped 1/2 register, the voice he used when a measurement needed to be exact. The Voss Analytics data export log for Asset DB reference 2241 shows 3 unauthorized pulls between April 9th and June 22nd. The admin credentials used to bypass the export restriction on June 19th are yours. The receiving entity Iterex Analytics LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary of Parallax. The $280,000 payment to Sol Strategic LLC from Iterex Analytics, dated July 7th, is in Parallax's vendor records. The SEX Market Integrity Unit has an established protocol for data acquisition that appears in competitor vendor records. They are thorough and they are not fast. He picked up the sanding block. He returned to the hull. Brendan's hand went still. He had been mid-push on the glasses, the quarter-inch push already begun, the frame not yet reached its new position. His hand stopped. The glasses sat fractionally left of center, not enough for anyone to notice who had not been watching for it, and were not corrected. He looked at Owen's back. He looked at Nadia. She was looking at him with the expression that means the calculation has already been completed and the number is not good. He left. No final line. No composure reassembled for the egg. He walked through the gate and was gone the way a mistake goes once it has been named quietly, without ceremony, no longer carrying any of the weight it had arrived with. Nadia stood at the end of the pier. The water moved. The Parallax sloop rocked gently in its slip. The sound of the sanding block on the hull was the only sound for a long moment. "How long have you known?" she said. 3 months, he said. "About Brendan." "And the rest?" He set the sanding block down. "Come to the boat," he said. "I'll tell you the rest." She searched Calder Capital on her phone on the walk to his slip. 2 funds, $180 million in Fund 1, $280 million in Fund 2. A portfolio list, 26 companies. She scrolled to the Fund 2 additions. The third name was Parallax Systems. The managing partner's photograph loaded under the bio she did not need to read. She put her phone away. He was sitting on the stern seat when she reached the slip not working, the sanding block on the dock beside him, as though he had known the walk would take exactly as long as it had. She sat on the dock edge, feet above the water, close enough to read the transom letters from 2 feet away. She said, "You ran Calder Capital. For 9 years, you funded Parallax, Series A, $12 million. She absorbed this. The water moved under the hull. "Why did you come to my office?" she said. 2 years ago. What you were actually there for. He told her. In flat sentences, the way he said everything that mattered, he had had a term sheet for a company called Meridian Analytics, a data infrastructure platform he believed was the best product in its category. He had come to offer a partnership, Voss Analytics' distribution network, in exchange for Calder Capital's investment and board seat. He had slides. He had prepared numbers. He had also, and he acknowledged, this was his error, not hers, been aware, by the time he walked into her conference room, of something he had been carrying since a conference 8 months earlier, where they had spoken for 20 minutes, and he had left the conversation thinking about it for 3 days. He had done the professional meeting. He had been precise about the Meridian term. He had then, at the end, asked for something that was not in the slides. He had asked for a second chance. Not at the partnership. At the 20 minutes. She had laughed. He had understood the laugh correctly, not cruelty. He was certain of that. The laugh of someone caught off guard by a question they do not know how to hold and so make it smaller. He had understood this. He had also felt the specific, exhausting experience of understanding something correctly and having it make no difference. He had walked out. He had driven to his attorney. The Parallax term sheet had been waiting 3 days. He had been stalling on it because Meridian Analytics was the better product, and he had always been honest with his capital. After the laugh, the honesty felt like a loyalty he could not afford. He had signed the Parallax papers. Not as revenge. He had told himself this carefully, and checked it often, and mostly believed it. Not as revenge as the only direction left that did not require him to drive past her building on the way to work. The connection to her world, Parallax Pro, the announcement scheduled for noon on Thursday, which would collapse her Series D if it ran on time, had been built using the client data Brendan had sold through Iterex. Without Brendan's data, the product would have needed 18 more months of development. Without the Thursday announcement, her round closed safely. Without his decision to sign the term sheet 2 years ago, the chain did not exist. He was not complicit through act. He was complicit through grief. He had funded the machine that was taking her apart because the laugh had left him with nowhere else to direct $12 million. And Parallax was where the capital had gone. And the fact that it happened to be her main competitor was the universe's way of making him feel the full weight of leaving without explaining. He told her all of this without drama in his voice, the way you state measurements, and the weight was entirely in the measurements themselves. She sat at the dock edge for a long time after he stopped talking. The water moved below her feet. The traveler was on the bow seat where Phoebe had left it, the blue glass in the slip's light. She looked at the name on the transom. "Why Parallax?" she said. Not an the real question, the one she had been holding since the first night. He thought about it. "I needed to know if I was angry. At you or at myself." A pause. "Neither," he said. "I was just wrong." She looked at the name for another moment. Then at him. "So was I," she said. 4 words, the opposite register of every long, controlled sentence she had begun with. She stayed at the dock until the light went. The Voss Analytics Board convened at 8 a.m. on Friday. Brendan Soul was in the room when it started. He would not be in the room when it ended. The forensic report had been prepared by Voss Analytics' security team overnight. 3 pages of session logs, API export records, and Iterex vendor payment documentation that Owen had transmitted to Nadia's general counsel at 11 p.m. the previous evening. The report was on the table when Brendan sat down. The board chair was already seated. A representative from the Sex Market Integrity Unit was present by video link. Brendan looked at the report. He reached for his glasses, the 1/4-inch push. The habit, his hand stopped. His fingers rested against the frame and did not complete. The glasses stayed exactly as they had been, exactly centered, and he left them there. The board chair opened to page 2. The export logs are time-stamped. The admin credential is yours. The Iterex payment to Sol Strategic is in the vendor record. We would like your explanation of the Iterex relationship before we proceed. Brendan said, the consulting arrangement was arm's length. There was no the export restriction bypass on June 19th, was not arm's length, the board chair said. She said it the way you close a calculation. The SEC representative will explain the next steps. Brendan's glasses were still perfectly centered. He stood. He walked to the door and through it, and out of the building, and the sound of the outer door settling into its frame was not dramatic and was not significant, and was the same sound any door makes when it closes on something that is finished. At 8:47 a.m., the lead investor's legal team confirmed, with the Iterex data acquisition under active SEC review, Parallax's board had postponed the Parallax Pro announcement pending the inquiry outcome. The Series D would proceed at its original valuation. At 8:53 a.m., the board chair stamped the Series D commitment letter. The stamp fell once solid, unhurried, no sound larger than a stapler, and the 84 hours compressed into nothing. And the $320 million held in place, and the $750 million valuation held in place, and the audience watched the clock stop. Nadia turned and looked at Owen. He was near the door. He had not been part of the board meeting, had been in the corridor, and she had left the door slightly open when she went in. He was not looking at the room. He was looking at the commitment letter on the table. His hands were at his sides, open. His face held the expression of a man who has been carrying something at a particular angle for 2 years and has just shifted it, and is learning, in real time, whether it is heavier or lighter now that it has moved. She looked at that for 1 beat longer than necessary. He looked back. Neither of them named it. 10 months later, Phoebe had decided the traveler had found its destination and should be displayed accordingly, which meant the kitchen windowsill where the morning light came through, and every morning she checked that it was still there. It was always still there. She reported this to her father at breakfast on a regular basis, and he received the reports with the seriousness they deserved. The slip at Garrison Marina had 2 new restoration projects on the work order board. The Herreshoff had been delivered in August. The granddaughter had sailed it in a local race and finished 3rd, which the estate called a triumph, and which Owen thought was exactly right. A 1952 Chris Craft had come in through a referral the previous month from a family in Portland who had been meaning to restore it for 20 years and had finally decided that meaning to was not the same as doing. The sloop at his personal slip had a different name on the transom. He had repainted it on a Tuesday in November, when the light was good for the work. He had chosen the name the morning Nadia asked him why he had named it Parallax, and had been carrying it since, and the name he painted was the one he would have used if he had been honest with himself 2 years earlier, instead of accountable. He had not explained it to anyone. The slip's regulars had noticed and had not asked, which he appreciated. Nadia's office had one new thing on the east wall. The competitive threat matrix 3 years of updates and market position indicators had come down on a Saturday in October. She had taken it down herself, without announcing it, and had left the wall blank for a week while she decided what belonged there. What went up was a nautical chart of the bay, the kind used for actual navigation, with depth soundings and tidal markers, and the location of Garrison Marina in the southeast corner. She had framed it herself. She had not explained it to her board. She did not think it required explanation. An evening at the marina, the light going at the same angle it had gone the first night. A look held 1 beat longer than it needed to be. Both of them knew what the beat meant. Neither of them had named it yet. Second chances don't announce themselves. They arrive with calloused hands and a compromised dock, and wait. She had believed, standing at a marina event layout on a Thursday evening, that she was looking at the dock crew. She found instead a man who had been watching a plank deteriorate for 4 months and waiting for a reason to say something, who had painted the name of a mistake on the side of his boat so he could look at it every morning and decide how he felt about it, and who had answered the question she finally asked with the same plain precision she had refused to receive 2 years earlier. If this story reached you today, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the things you walk away from are not always finished with you. Subscribe if you have been here for a while. And leave us this: if you laughed at someone's turning point, not knowing it was their turning point, would knowing now be enough? We read every one.